I beat Elden Ring without leveling, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's just Elden Ring, but without doing one of these. As you can imagine, this drastically changes the game, since no levels means you have a very small red bar for the whole game, and you can't increase your damage outside of weapon levels. Apart from the obvious changes though, being at level 1 also forces you to use items and strategies that you wouldn't normally use, either because you don't have the stats to use regular gear, or to counteract the small red bar situation. Plus, your low health and damage changes boss encounters drastically. Your low health forces you to be more confident dodging every attack, and your low damage extends the duration of the fight, creating more opportunities for mistakes. It cranks up the difficulty even further, and as a result, your skill and the design of the game are put under extreme scrutiny. Oh my god! Fucking discs!
Well, until now.
Discs! So let's see if Elden Ring holds up when you don't level. And if you enjoy the video, press all the buttons below. It really helps. Thanks. But of course, before we do any of that stuff, we have to go pick up a bunch of items from all over the map. As with all good Elden Ring runs, it starts with a bunch of setup. Man, I love Elden Ring's setup. Even on a run where you don't level, it's still an hour and a half of grabbing items. Most notably, I picked up Radagon's Scar Seal from Fort Faroth, did Raya's quest have access to the Volcano Manor for later, and killed Morgott.
That's the fists of Big Morgott.
This took me more attempts than most of the main bosses. That's unironically the case. But he does drop the infinite boiled crab bell bearing and my main weapon. This isn't the best weapon for RL1, but it's my favorite weapon in the game, and I didn't want to be too overpowered for the first half of the game, which you would be if you picked up the Serpent Hunter. I got my balls to plus 12 and went to kill our first boss. Margit is iconic for being a brick wall that new players came up against when Elden Ring first released. He's most well known for his very delayed swings, which catch people off guard and heavily punish panic rolling. I think this is a very good trait for the first boss to have. He teaches the player early on that they aren't going to make it through the game just spamming roll, and they need to carefully observe animations to dodge attacks. I also think he holds up really well on repeat playthroughs. Despite being the first boss, he's quite complex. He tends to set a lot of traps for the player that punish them for dodging in a certain direction or attacking when they aren't supposed to. Like this attack, for example, where he throws out a slow sweep, which he'll follow up with 2 quick slashes with his dagger to punish you for rolling in or trying to attack him. Generally, you can get into a nice rhythm with this fight of walking close, waiting to see what attack he winds up, and then either rolling through it for the punish or rolling away if it's not safe. If you're struggling with this fight at level 1, I would recommend light rolling, since the extra distance you get from the light roll puts you out of range of most of his follow-ups. I wouldn't say this boss is necessarily better at level 1. It's pretty much the same, since you can run up and fight him immediately anyway. Godrick has really fallen out of favor with me over time. When I first fought him, I really liked the fight, but on repeat playthroughs, he's become more of a pain. Also, he's a massive loser lore-wise. Apparently, he just got blasted by Malenia and begged for his life, but to be honest, we all get blasted by Malenia, so maybe that's not too big of a deal. Godrick is also known for having these incredibly slow geriatric attacks that are interwoven into normal speed combos. These always felt kind of off for me. I get that that's kind of his deal, like that's his unique feature, but it feels unnaturally slow at times, like they just took a normal speed animation and cut the frame rate in half. It throws off the rhythm of the fight. He also has this incredibly annoying and kind of bullshit at times wind projectile attack that he's supposed to only use when you're far away, but sometimes he'll just throw it out at close range and it's basically impossible to dodge. So if you're doing RL1 and you see this attack, it's GG, it's over. Just start writing a will. Fortunately, at the start of phase 2, he does this attack, which is really easily punishable, and you can pretty much outright I end the fight there, even at level 1. Overall, Godrick is okay, but he's very outclassed by the boss that came just before him. After killing Godrick, you have access to his Great Rune, which is a really useful item for level 1 runs, since it increases all of your stats by 5 while you have a rune arc activated. I barely use this because I'm the greatest being to ever touch a controller, and not because I forgot it existed. After this, I also took the time to get another really useful item for RL1, the Opaline Bubble Tier. If you put this in your physic, you will take 90% less damage the next time you get hit, which is perfect for a run where lots of things can one-shot you. I also headed up to Horah Loux where I picked up one of the best armor sets in the game for RL1. It has great resistances for its weight, plus it's a Moongrum cosplay, which is what I've always wanted. While I'm here, I also beat up the dog so I could get the Glintstone Wetblade and have access to the Cold Infusion, which will give my weapons frost buildup. The dog is like the opposite of Godrick. I find myself enjoying him more on repeat playthroughs. His attacks are well telegraphed, there's plenty of large damage windows, and his sword swings are pretty satisfying to dodge. The only thing I still don't think really works is his bites. They have slightly awkward telegraphing where it seems like the attack starts before the wind up for it has finished and you just get jump scared. It's a small thing that you can get used to, but it comes across as jarring on my first attempt back every time. He has a tiny health pool though, so he goes down really fast even at level 1, which is kind of a shame, but it's probably for the best since his moveset isn't that large or varied, and it would be a lot more noticeable if the fight were any longer. At this point, I for some reason decided to go and get the Serpent Hunter, which is the weapon used to fight Rykard and the undisputed best RL1 weapon in the game because of its high base damage and lack of stat requirements. This means going through the Godskin Noble, which normally people just sleep pot and bleed, but that's boring. So I parried him instead. Before parrying him, I always thought of this boss as kind of a chore. His moveset just never really clicked with me, and it didn't help that in his second phase he has that really annoying rolling attack that I'm sure everyone is familiar with. But when I decided to parry him, it changed everything. I look forward to this boss, like actively look forward to it every single time. I recommend going and picking up Golden Parry for this, because it makes the parry window slightly longer. I'm serious, next time you have to go fight this guy, just try parrying him. It's way easier than it looks, and it makes the fight 100 times better. Although that definitely doesn't extend to the duo. They can rot in hell. I grabbed the Serpent Hunter, got it to +9, and went back to Horah Loux to fight Renalla. Also, I just wanted to mention that Moongrum gets his shit kicked in by the Iron Balls. One jump heavy breaks his guard, so you can just critical him over and over and over. I know a lot of people get bullied by him. This includes me, by the way, before I knew this, so hopefully this helps. Phase 1 of Renalla is really cool, at least spectacle-wise. The intro cutscene is very eerie and weird, and it adds a lot of atmosphere to the fight. Mechanically, this phase is obviously very weak, as most heavily gimmick-based fights are. It doesn't pose much of a challenge even on your first run or at level 1. It can even be a pain sometimes, since you have to go through it every time you attempt the boss, and that's on top of the long run back, since there's no stake of Baraka outside her boss room, which is actually more accurate, by the way, since Renalla wouldn't put a statue of the woman that stole her husband outside her room. It's a bold decision for lore to explain shitty game design, but Miyazaki is a bold man. Phase 2 is a lot more satisfying mechanically, with one of the more successful takes on a spellcaster boss From Software have produced, although all of this can be bypassed by having a very, very strong weapon and killing her instantly. Yeah, this is why I didn't want to go get the Serpent Hunter straight away. It's just too powerful for early game. To be fair though, Renalla does get beaten up on most runs. She's mostly the same as normal. An okay boss, but Elden Ring has a lot more to offer. Before we make it to the capital, we have to fight the Draconic Tree Sentinel, which is a boss I always find myself really enjoying. He's very tough for this point in the game, and I think that's because you're expected to explore and level up before going to the capital. Obviously that's not possible at level 1 though. As a result, this becomes the first real challenge of the run. He can easily one-shot you with pretty much every single attack he has. Fortunately, it's a very fair fight, and if you stick to his shield side, the only really tough attack to dodge is his lightning strike, which has a very tight dodge window, but is very satisfying to dodge once you get it down. I don't have any major complaints about this boss, but he can spam his fireballs sometimes, which gets kind of annoying. Overall, I think he's pretty great, and he presents the level of challenge I was expecting from this run. Also, if you're struggling with that lightning attack, if you light roll, it makes it considerably easier to dodge. Finally, we made it to the capital, where we can pick up the most important item for RL1 runs, the Ritual Shield Talisman. This talisman greatly reduces the damage you take when you're at full health. It will allow us to not die in one hit to most of the bosses remaining. While we're here, we also pick up the Iron Ball's older brother, the Starfist, which is pretty much a direct upgrade in every way. It's just the Iron Balls, but with bleed buildup. I immediately infused these with cold, got them to plus 12, and also put the Ash of War Cragblade on them. Cragblade is basically just a straight damage buff. Unfortunately, the Starfist isn't going to be useful for this next boss, Goldfrey, Godfrey's Piss Ghost. This is a really great boss and a very fun fight. Goldfrey doesn't have a huge moveset, but the moves he does have are very well telegraphed and enjoyable to dodge. He's not a very unique or complex fight, but he does the basics really well, and it just so happens that the basics are enormously enjoyable. He's also one of the few bosses in the game with a move specifically designed to be dodged by jumping. His stomp that leaves a cone of spikes on the ground can be jumped, and with weapons like the Serpent Hunter, you can even throw in a jump attack to keep up poise damage. I'll have more to say about this boss when we talk about Horah Loux, since Goldfrey is essentially a trimmed down version of his phase 1 moveset. He's pretty easy at RL1 too. Just ignore how I got blasted on my first attempt, my brain was liquefied. I forgot to do Radahn, so I'm doing him now. I love this guy, and not even because of the fight, but just because he was cool as a person. He was one of the few demigods that didn't try to instigate anything after the shattering and just attempted to defend himself. Plus he learned gravity magic specifically so he could keep riding his horse Leonard without crushing him. It's a shame the funny rot woman made him go insane, because he would have been a cool NPC. I'd want to be friends with Radahn in real life. Mechanically, his fight is also pretty good. It's one of the few times where I feel like the camera zooms out enough to accommodate for the size of a boss. I have no real complaints about his moveset. His attacks have deceptively large dodge windows, so he's a lot easier than you'd expect, and he leaves massive openings for punishes. He feels like just the right difficulty for the stage of the game he's in. Also, if you're fighting him at level 1, I'd recommend running backwards when you enter the arena. This unloads Radahn, so when you load him back in, he'll immediately pull out his swords and you can skip running up the hill towards him. Also, I may have killed the pop man. Morgott is a boss that doesn't receive the love he deserves. I think a lot of people overlook him because by the time they got there, they were so overpowered they basically insta-killed him. Being at level 1 does somewhat remedy this problem. With the Starfist at least, there was no way I could have scripted the fight. Morgott's moveset is a massive expansion on the ideas presented in Margit's fight, which would be expected I guess because it's the same guy. Morgott is mainly about recognizing when something is or isn't punishable. He's very fast and very aggressive, and leaves you very few safe damage windows, so the challenge comes from heavily capitalizing on them. This playstyle is further encouraged by his relatively low poise. It gives the fight a very unique flow, where rather than a constant back and forth, you take turns absolutely demolishing each other. You'll be dodging, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, and then when it comes, you blast him for a massive chunk of his health bar. Phase 2 only improves on the ideas presented in the first phase, and I would say it's arguably easier. Yes, Morgott is more aggressive in this phase, but I find he tends to throw out more punishable attacks, and the blood flame slashes he adds to his moveset for this phase are some of your largest damage windows. Personally, I think Morgott is a fight that is heavily underrated, and it's a fight that gives you exactly what you'd want out of a level 1 run. It's an experience that you just wouldn't have on a normal playthrough. You might be wondering where all these runes are going, because obviously I'm not spending them on levels. Crab, they're being spent on crab. And after spending the Morgott runes, I finally maxed out my crab. 700 crabs, and I would buy more. I'm addicted to crab, but the handmaiden cut me off. This bitch won't sell me any more crab. Killing Morgott also gives us access to the mountaintops of the giants, so I got my Starfist to plus 19 using the bell bearing, and grabbed another useful item that I completely forgot about until now, the spiked crack tier, which is dropped from an Erdtree avatar in Caelid. It gives you 30 seconds of increased poise damage, which is really useful for bosses like Maliketh and Fire Giant. If you're doing this run, I highly recommend heading towards the Halig tree at this point, specifically for one item, the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, which reduces physical damage taken by a massive 20%. This stacks with our crab, giving us 40% physical damage negation overall. Unfortunately though, this means we have to fight Niall next. Now this normally wouldn't be a bad thing. On a normal run, he's fine, but at level 1, he's fucking torture. He's awful. It's unbearable unbearable. It's so bad. I would rather scratch my eyes out. This took me way longer than it should have, and it's purely because of these stupid fucking summons. There's so much RNG involved as well. They have to do specific things at the start of the fight. The vast majority of my attempts just look like this. It took me so much longer than it needed to, and the difficulty of the fight was so artificial. The best strategy I could come up with, and hopefully this will help you, is doing a double charge heavy on the right-hand summon with the Serpent Hunter, staggering them, and then riposting them, and just praying that I didn't get frame-trapped after the riposte and insta-killed. Once the summons are gone, the fight with Niall himself is actually really good. I genuinely like it a lot, especially with the Starfist, because these things absolutely wreck him. The charge heavy on them is so fast that you can weave them between his attacks and just stagger him over and over. Niall's moveset appears scary at first because he has a lot of AoEs, but once you get the timing down to dodge his most dangerous attacks, like his lightning kick, he's pretty straightforward. I would like this fight a whole lot more if there weren't any summons. It would just be a straight up improvement to the fight in every way, and their presence literally ruins it at level 1, which is a massive shame. Once we make it to the snowfield, we can also kill this NPC invader and get a plus 10 for our Serpent Hunt. Then the only thing between us and the Halig tree is Ordina. I hate this place. Here we are, the Femboy Erd Tree. And also, if you're here, you have to do the skip. I'm pretty sure it's illegal not to. Loretta gets pounded by the Starfist. Similarly to Niall, the charge heavy is just fast enough to weave between attacks, which gives you constant staggers. And being that close to the boss also makes her use melee attacks, which are much easier to dodge and generally just make for a more engaging fight. That's the real difference maker with this fight. If you're able to close the gap and force melee attacks, the fight is really fun. Her moves are well telegraphed, leave space for frequent punishes, and can even be strafed, making for some really satisfying dodges. Like, look at these incredible hitboxes as I duck under her attack while I'm doing the charge heavy. Damn, that shit is so good. But if you can't close that distance, it's a very boring fight, characterized by a lot of magic spam. So it's not a boss suited for all styles of play. It wants to funnel you into fighting her a specific way, which is alright, but not ideal. It works for me though, because I like to smash things with my spiky hands. Oh, my crouch button's broken. Oh no, oh. With Loretta dead, there's nothing stopping us from grabbing the talisman. See, very simple and easy. We'll be back here soon, I promise. I'm not scared of Malenia, it's just not time yet. Mohg is one of my favorite bosses in the game. He's just such a character, such a silly and goofy, quizzical little guy. He sits up here in his absurd blood palace, and he's obsessed with this femboy. It's all just so weird. It's like that kid that had a really traumatic upbringing, so they just never grew out of their childhood obsessions. Obviously, normally that's like Legos or something and not blood, but whatever.
Mohg?
I need to find a way to insert Germa into every video. Also, Mohg gets extra points because I think the way he says Mikola is funny. Mechanically, Mohg is also just super solid. Most of his attacks are really slow swings, which are tricky to get the timing for at first, but once you get used to it, the fight becomes really fun. This dodge is especially satisfying to pull off, where you strafe his blood claw and then duck his swing. The only criticism I have for him is that he can get a little spammy with the blood flame, especially in phase 2. It's just a little bit too much. If it lingered for a few seconds less or wasn't on every attack, I think it would slightly improve the fight, especially at level 1, where staying at full health is so important to get that ritual shield talisman effect. Although I do like some aspects of his blood flame attacks, like how you can tell if he's going to throw horizontally or vertically based on a slight difference in how he holds his hand, and that it discourages rolling away in phase 2, which guides the player into the ideal way to fight the boss. Mohg has really grown on me since I first fought him, and he's one of the better bosses at level 1, despite taking me quite a while to beat. This guy's kind of annoying. He used to be a whole lot more annoying, but then I learnt the forbidden secret technique called getting off the fucking horse and fighting him from the front. I see so many people make this mistake of slashing away at him on horseback, and it just makes no sense. You do less damage, it's nowhere near Malenia is safe, and it's not nearly as engaging. If you fight the fire giant on the horse, trust me, get off the fucking horse and just stand in front of him. Hit him in the hands after he attacks, you'll have a much better time. Still though, this guy has so much jank. His fire attacks are usually the source of it. Fire in Elden Ring tends to not behave. It will bounce around, linger for ages, and just kill you in dumb, unpredictable ways. Fire Giant has a lot of fire in his moveset, hence the name, so the potential for bullshit is through the roof, as shown by this helpful diagram on screen. It's not the worst thing in the world, but the problem is exacerbated by the fact that the fight doesn't have a whole lot to offer mechanically anyway, so it's very easy to get frustrated. He's kind of a chore, but if you fight him from the front, it's over pretty fast, even at level 1. Oh god, here they are. I was dreading this fight, like really dreading it. This was the one that I knew was going to be a pain coming into it, and I was completely right. My first idea was just to do what I normally do and parry the fat one over and over until they're dead, but it quickly became apparent that that just wasn't going to work with damage this low, so I reluctantly went and got sleep pots. By the way, you can totally just stack a bunch of buffs and end this fight instantly with sleep pots, but I didn't really want to have to do that. I wanted to actually fight the boss, so what I did instead was essentially sleep the skinny one and fight the fatty one-on-one with parries, basically making it like the Volcano Mana fight all over again. This worked, but it was very, very stressful. Like, you can hear it in my voice how stressed I was in the final moments of the fight. Come on. Come on. Please hurry up. If Skinny woke up, it was basically game over. Fighting them at the same time was way too unpredictable and slow. You're bound to get caught out at some point, and you really can't afford to get hit at all with your level 1 health bar. My strategy worked, but barely, so if you're going to do this, just insta-kill them with sleep pots. This boss is awful. It's poorly thought out, and it's subject to an absurd amount of RNG. It's not fun at level 1, so nobody is going to blame you for skipping it. Also, these clips are from Gino Machino, by the way, which is probably the greatest player to ever touch a Souls game. I'm just spreading the word of our Lord and Savior. Maliketh is one of my favorite bosses in the game, like easily top 3. Phase 1, the Breast Clergyman, is a really unique fight that took me quite a long time to understand. He's a boss that you need to fight in a really specific way, whereas with most bosses you can kind of just dodge stuff and openings will naturally present themselves to you. With the Beast Clergyman, you need to carefully consider how you're dodging and your positioning to bait out specific attacks that give you punish windows. The main one you're trying to get at all times is this slow slam that's essentially a free charge heavy with any weapon. This attack though is a really specific follow-up that ends 3 different combos. You have to play around this knowledge, trying to stand at the correct range to bait these combos and then dodge appropriately to bait the slow slam finisher. And once you get it down, it feels pretty good. It gives the fight a really unique flow, which I like a lot, and it plays with the nuances of positioning more so than any other boss. Second phase is what most people will remember of this fight though. Maliketh presentation-wise is literally perfect, like 10 out of 10, and he gets extra points for being a very good boy. His moveset is equally well thought out, but a lot more straightforward than the Beast Clergyman. The only attack that stands out is his Vortex attack, which he can end certain combos with. This is by far his most deadly attack and his hardest one to dodge, since it 1 requires you to have not overcommitted to a punish before the attack, and 2 to react really quickly to its telegraph. This attack alone is why I always light roll for this boss. To dodge it, you need to cover a lot of distance, so light roll really helps with that. And I've also found that if I dodge it correctly with light roll, I can actually get in a pretty large punish while he's doing the attack. It's a very consistent attack to dodge once you get it down, unlike Waterfowl or Elden Stars for example, but its constant presence does make the fight considerably more difficult. Maliketh is also a boss that's greatly improved during a level 1 run. I think this is mostly because of his really low health and poise that make him somewhat of a glass cannon. This makes it really easy for you to script his second phase on a normal run, where you can just stagger him and then insta-kill him. Obviously you can't do this at level 1, so you actually have to deal with his moveset. It's a lot more interesting this way. Man, I fucking hate this boss. It's crazy to me that he's in the state that he's in. From Software's pretty well known for making quite shitty NPC bosses, like we saw it with the Champion Gravetender, we saw it with Half-Light, and it's at its worst here with Gideon. Like, I love From Software bosses, I love these games, their boss design is incredible, but they keep trying to make this NPC boss thing work, and it's just not gonna work. I swear to God, if we see another fucking NPC boss in the DLC. It's just, why? Why would you do that to us? Why would you do that? Gideon is definitely the NPC boss at its worst. He constantly spams magic attacks, which do way too much damage and come out incredibly fast, and also have a ton of jank with them. Like, look at this clip where I try to dodge Comet Azure at close range, and I'm way past where it should be able to hit me, and it still hits me. It's just absurd. That's not even his worst attack, though. His worst attack by far is the fucking discs. These discs have the hitbox the size of a truck. If you're anywhere near these discs, you're gonna get hit, and it's gonna take off like 80% of your health. Oh my god, fucking discs!
Well, until now.
If you're doing this run at level 1, all I can say for this is good luck. It took me about an hour, and the only strategy that even kind of worked was spamming running attacks with the Serpent Hunter, so maybe try that. Horah Loux is an excellent boss. I don't think anyone will argue with me on that. He's undoubtedly one of the best bosses in Elden Ring. Phase 1 is a much more expansive version of what was shown with Goldfrey, where they doubled down on the use of the jump, which by the way is heavily underutilized in Elden Ring during combat. Phase 2 is a completely new idea where Godfrey turns into Zangief and starts throwing you around. I like this phase a lot. It's terrifying, so you want to run away constantly, but Horah Loux is so fast and aggressive that the pace of the fight isn't interrupted. It's kind of like fighting a rampaging bull, but not terrible like it is in Sekiro. The only thing that's kind of annoying is his raw attack, which he'll throw out occasionally. Its hitbox stays out for way too long, so you can't iframe it with a roll from close range, and as a result, it's completely unpunishable. It's just a get-off-me time waster move that serves very little purpose. This is another boss that you can script relatively easily on a normal run, since he gives you a big opening at the start of phase 2, so I prefer the fight at level 1, although I think you get a lot out of it either way. Ooh, here she is, big spooky scary rot woman. Earlier I said I wasn't scared of her. I'm not scared of Malenia, and that was very true at the time. I had practiced her a lot, so I was pretty confident, even though I'd seen other people spend a lot of time on her during their level 1 runs. I kind of thought I would run in there and kill her in a few attempts, to be honest. It was bad, much harder than I expected, and I'm not even sure why. It took me about an hour and a half to kill her, which doesn't sound like a lot, but I had practiced her a lot. So if you're doing this yourself, good luck. I recommend the Serpent Hunter and light rolling. Aside from me getting my ass kicked, I really like Malenia's fight. I enjoy her moveset. It leaves more than enough openings for attacks while still being challenging to dodge. And surprisingly, I've kind of grown to like Waterfowl. It's really hard to dodge, yes, but when you get used to it, it's very satisfying to dodge. She's a boss that lets a good player be good, especially if you can do the close range Waterfowl dodge consistently. But maybe I just have Stockholm Syndrome from practicing her too much. I have one tiny, minute issue with the fight though. In phase 2, sometimes the wind-up for an attack can be blocked by one of her wings, so you can't tell it's coming and you feel cheated out of a death. Like, you can kind of tell she's going to attack because she's moving, but it could also easily be an idle animation or something like that. I liked fighting her at level 1 because it was more difficult than normal, but she's already hard enough, to be honest. And I can imagine if you haven't specifically practiced her like I have, the fight might lose its charm after 5+ hours of attempts. Radahn is really up there as one of my favorite bosses in the game, and honestly one of my favorites of all time. I think his moveset is incredibly well telegraphed, fun to fight against with any weapon, and varied enough to not get boring if the fight goes long. He's also one of the few enemies like Horah Loux that is designed around jumping as a way to dodge attacks, which I appreciate. The boss is immaculate, and I wish he had more health and was his own separate boss because it's a shame that he has to be grouped in with Elden Beast. In an ideal world, there would be no Elden Beast, just a heavily expanded Radahn fight followed up by a surprise cameo from Slave Knight Gale. And I talk a lot of shit about Elden Beast, but I don't actually hate him. I used to, a lot. I used to really hate this guy, to the extent that I wanted him removed from the game. But I'm a changed man now. I'm kind of an Elden Beast enjoyer. I would still prefer if he wasn't the final boss, because Radahn outclasses him in every possible way, but he's not the worst thing in the world. The vast majority of his Elden's moveset is completely serviceable. It's just well-telegraphed sword swings and AoEs that give you openings to attack while providing some challenge to dodge. But there's just this one attack that is trash. The infamous Elden Stars, an attack that was thought to be undodgeable for a long time. It turns out you can dodge it by using the Elden Beast to body block the attack, but it's pretty hard to pull off. I hate this attack. It's stupid and poorly designed, and the method to dodge it is way too obtuse to be reasonably figured out. The fight would be objectively improved if it was gone. It single-handedly takes the Elden Beast down a tier. You might think this would pretty much ruin the fight at level 1, but if you time your staggers correctly, you can cancel the attack. You just need to keep in mind that he'll do Elden Stars at just under 50% health. Other than that though, this fight is relatively unchanged at level 1. Your damage is surprisingly decent, even at this point in the game. So, is Elden Ring better at level 1? No. Not really. The Elden Ring RL1 experience is very mixed. It flip-flops between really great and dreadful. It's something that I definitely think is worth doing for the good parts, but I think it's best to decide for yourself if you think going through Gideon and the Godskin Duo is worth that. The only group of people I can 100% recommend this to is those who have already done a level 1 run of any of the other Souls games. The Elden Ring RL1 run is probably the easiest to do, or at the very least it's way easier than Dark Souls 3. The thing is, Elden Ring is an absolute masterpiece of a game, so it's hard to recommend something over the experience you get playing it normally. You'll miss out on a lot of the game's greatest aspects, like weapon variety and the expansive magic system. I can't definitely say that everyone should try this like I did with Dark Souls 3, but there's a lot to enjoy about it, and I do appreciate the game more because of it. Thanks for watching.